So if you bought a ticket for the Concorde, you weren't just buying travel. It felt more like time travel, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This thing was, well, the absolute pinnacle of human engineering back then.
New York to London in 3.5 hours. I mean, you're crossing the Atlantic faster than the ice melts in your drink. It was that stratospheric cocktail party.
Exactly. It was the ultimate status symbol. For nearly 30 years, 76 to 2003, it flew with this almost perfect record. It stood for speed, luxury, faith in technology.
And the price tag reflected that, upwards of 12 grand.
Yeah, a serious feat of aviation spectacle.
And then, poof, it was gone. Just like that. Became a museum piece.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the story everyone knows, the one you hear all the time, is that awful crash. Air France, 4590 in 2000. That's what killed it. Public lost faith, grounded 3 years later. Simple.
Well, it's simple and convenient. That's the easily digestible narrative, sure.
Yeah.
But, when you really dig into it, the technical reports, the investigation transcripts, the company
A
books,
different pattern emerges.
a much more specific kind of hidden pattern, yeah. That disaster wasn't the root cause. It was more like the final devastating symptom. It was the result of these deep systemic design compromises and, frankly, unforgiving economics that had been boxing the Concorde in from day one.
Okay, so that's our mission today then. We're going to give you that insider view, uncover the real mechanics, the financial flaws that actually made the Concorde's grounding inevitable. Crash or no crash.
Let's do it. And we kind of have to start with the basic design, because the very thing that made Concorde so stunning, so unique,
The look of it.
right, that beautiful delta wing,
Yeah.
was also its biggest operational weakness. That's, I think, our first big counterintuitive point here.
The wing. Okay, so for those of us like me who aren't aeronautical engineers, what did that ogival delta wing, that shape, what did it actually mean for the people flying it, operating it, especially at crucial moments like takeoff?
Yeah, it was a marvel, no doubt, that shape. Kind of like a long, stretched-out triangle. It was basically the only way they could figure out how to make a wing work efficiently across totally different speeds: subsonic, transonic, and supersonic. It was the ultimate compromise.
Okay, but compromise always implies a cost, right? So where did this compromise bite the hardest?
It bit hardest during the slowest parts, takeoff and landing. See, to get enough lift to haul that heavy bird off the ground, the Concorde needed two things: incredibly high speed on the runway and a very high angle of attack, nose pointed way up.
Ah, okay. And this is where that hidden pattern, the pre-existing condition you mentioned, starts to become clear. High speed on the ground. How fast are we talking compared to, say, a regular jet, like a 737?
Right. Think about this. Your standard airliner, maybe a Boeing 737, it lifts off, rotates at maybe 140, 150 knots-ish.
Okay.
The Concorde, it needed to hit nearly 200 knots. That's like 230 miles per hour before the wheels even left the pavement.
Wow.
And that speed, plus the weight, plus the long takeoff roll, it put this enormous, unique, and crucially recurring stress on the tires.
So the tires were the Achilles heel. Just because the aerodynamics demanded that brutal speed on the ground, that's the vulnerability everyone kind of missed? Or maybe ignored?
Well, missed might be strong.
Yeah.
Ignored, maybe closer. Look at the track record. It's pretty alarming when you lay out the data. Over its entire life, Concorde had 57 incidents of tire bursts.
57. That's not random. That's a known issue baked into the system.
Exactly. It's systemic.
Yeah.
And out of those 57, 12 actually caused structural damage, and six times debris penetrated a fuel tank. This wasn't some unknown. It was a known hazard. They just kept managing.
And you mentioned something chilling from way back in 1979. There was a precedent, wasn't there? A tire burst in Washington, D.C.
Yes, absolutely. Debris hit the wing, punctured it, caused a fuel leak, and damaged the hydraulics. Investigators looked right at it. They recommended, better tires, more protection for hydraulic lines. But the key thing, they decided the risk of fire from that kind of small, unpressurized leak was, and I quote, very small.
Huh. Were they just underestimating the sheer force involved, the energy of tire debris hitting the wing at that speed? Or was that reasonable for 1979?
I think they fundamentally underestimated the consequences, severely. And that single risk assessment, that faulty judgment, became the accepted baseline for the next 20 years of operation. They knew the hazard was there, but they didn't grasp the catastrophic potential, the cascade effect.
Which brings us right to that collision point. The 121 seconds of Air France 4590, July 25th, 2000, where that known vulnerability finally met? Well, terrible luck.
And the catalyst, the thing that started it all, was almost comically small. Just minutes before Concorde started its takeoff roll on runway 36 right at Charles de Gaulle,
Yeah.
the Continental Airlines DC-10, taking off ahead of it, dropped a little metal strip, titanium, about 43 centimeters long.
And wasn't there something weird about that strip itself? The reports mention it.
There was. It was actually improperly made. It had been drilled like 37 times instead of the required 12. And it was probably worn down by another strip next to it that was too long. So it's basically the perfect little razor-sharp piece of FOD, foreign object debris, sitting right there on the runway.
Waiting. So 1,700 meters down the runway. What happens in that instant?
Concorde hits it, rolls right over it at that incredible speed. Tire explodes instantly.
Bruh.
But the force, a huge chunk of rubber, maybe 4.5 kilos, gets flung upwards, violently hits the underside of the left wing, right under fuel tank number 5.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting technically, because it wasn't like the debris just sliced the tank open, right? That's not quite how it worked.
No. And this is critical for understanding these kinds of accidents. The tank was completely full, maximum fuel load for takeoff. So that external impact didn't just pierce the skin. It created this massive internal pressure wave inside the fuel itself.
Like dropping a bowling ball next to a full water balloon.
Exactly. The skin bursts, not where the impact happens outside, but where the fluid slams against it from the inside.
So the tank ruptured from the inside out. Wow. Okay, that's a huge revelation. And that let fuel just gush out.
Dozens of liters instantly.
Yeah.
And the fire ignited immediately. Probably electrical arcing from damaged wiring caused by the impact. And then tragedy, compounding tragedy, the landing gear was still down, obviously.
Right, for takeoff.
Which created this pocket of turbulent, low-pressure air right behind it. And that turbulence actually stabilized the flame, kept it attached to the wing, stopped the slipstream from blowing it out.
And the crew, they were already past the point of no return. The accident happened after V1, right? That decision speed.
Yeah.
198 knots. They had to take off.
They were committed, locked in. And immediately, the engines on that side, engines 1 and 2, started choking on the hot gas and debris being ingested. They stalled. The crew followed procedure, shut down engine 2 because of the fire warning.
So they're down 2 engines on one side, fire raging, landing gear stuck.
Stuck down, probably hydraulic damage, structural damage, preventing retraction. They couldn't accelerate to V2, the safe climb speed at 220 knots. They just didn't have the thrust.
They lost the race against physics. The investigation basically said there was very little to nothing the crew could have done at that point.
It was an irreversible failure sequence, triggered by a design vulnerability they'd known about or should have fully understood for 20 years.
The crash itself was horrifying, spectacular, tragic, utterly preventable in hindsight. But here's where we connect it back, the strategic insight for listeners.
Right. The reason Concorde stopped flying wasn't just that piece of metal or even the crash itself. The real killer, the thing that had already effectively condemned the aircraft, it was the economics, long before 2000.
And this is the second counterintuitive idea, isn't it? The crash. And yeah, 9/11 happening shortly after certainly didn't help, but they just sped up what was already coming. Concorde was basically dead on the balance sheet.
Precisely. And this is a pattern you see again and again with really complex boundary-pushing innovation. The tech is amazing, but the business model, it's just not scalable. It can't stick.
So let's look at that scaling problem. Concorde carried, what, 100 passengers, max 120, but often fewer?
Right. Compare that to a 747 back then carrying 400 plus. Concorde's capacity was tiny, so you couldn't spread the massive operating costs over many passengers.
Which meant tickets had to stay incredibly high, that $12,000 price tag. It limited the market to this tiny elite niche, made the whole thing incredibly sensitive to any kind of downturn or shock.
And the performance limits stacked up too. Those sonic booms, huge issue, meant it couldn't fly supersonic over land.
So basically just transatlantic routes. New York, London, Paris.
Pretty much. It could never tap into the really lucrative long-haul markets. Trans-Pacific routes, for example. New York to LA overland was impossible supersonically. Those are the routes that really make money for airlines.
And fuel. We have to talk fuel. It drank kerosene like nothing else.
Astronomical consumption, which made it extremely vulnerable to oil price spikes, like those in the late 90s. The profit margins, when they existed, were razor thin compared to the big, efficient, wide-body jets.
Plus, you had the operational demands. That clientele paying top dollar, they expected perfect reliability, tight schedules.
You couldn't just tell a plane load of CEOs and celebrities, sorry, bit of a technical snag, we'll be 6 hours late. Didn't work like that.
So the airlines, BA and Air France, they had to have backups.
Exactly. The sources confirm they literally had to part entire spare Concordes at places like JFK in New York, just sitting there.
They'd idle.
Burning money on maintenance, not earning a penny, just in case the scheduled one had a problem. That shows you how little operational slack, how little forgiveness was built into the system. It's an enormous economic drag.
So, okay, after the crash in 2000, they did fix things. They grounded it, spent a lot of money, Kevlar lining for the fuel tanks, new burst-resistant tires.
They addressed the specific failure mode, yes, made it safer in that regard, but then they brought it back into service.
Into the exact same fundamentally unscalable business model.
And that leads to the final nail in the coffin, the grounding decision in 2003. It wasn't really about lingering public fear or even technical risk anymore. It was cold, hard finance,
Oh, yeah.
about the future.
The manufacturer, Airbus by then, looked at this tiny fleet, only 14 planes left flying between the two airlines.
Tiny, aging fleet, still using analog controls, needing a flight engineer. These were not modern aircraft systems-wise.
Right.
And the cost of providing the essential mandatory upgrades needed to keep them flying safely into the 21st century for just 14 planes. It was astronomical. Airbus basically said, we can't justify supporting this anymore. It's wildly unprofitable.
The lack of scale killed the support structure.
Precisely. The manufacturer couldn't make a business case for the continued airworthiness support. That was the end.
So the real reason Concorde stopped flying wasn't the tragedy, horrific as it was. It was the simple, brutal math. The costs of keeping this small, specialized fleet going overwhelmed the tiny, niche revenues it could generate.
That's the hidden pattern. The actionable intelligence, breakthrough tech, amazing. But it's only step one. For it to stick, to really change things, it needs a robust, scalable support system. It needs to account for those known, recurring operational issues like tire stress. And crucially, it needs a sustainable economic model.
Concorde's legacy really shows us you can bend the laws of physics, but the laws of economics, much harder to break. The crash forced vital safety improvements, no question.
Absolutely necessary improvements. But if economics, not technical failure, is the ultimate gatekeeper for these kinds of ambitious transport projects,
Yeah?
if scale and cost are the final arbiters, well, it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
About what?
About the next generation. All these companies trying to bring back supersonic travel today. What fundamental, non-technical, maybe even non-obvious economic or structural problems are already boxing them in, even before they've built a full-scale prototype?